Uh, do you not?
I'm introducing Stanley. When I first got in the program, like almost 3 years ago, I was really scared and I didn't know how anything worked, like the first few months. And I remember that Stanley was one of the first people that approached me. And at the time, I was having a hard time, like, making friends with people, especially my age. And he just kind of like invited me to a group get together. And through that, I met a lot of the friends that I have today. And I see him do that still today. Like, even though he has like a crew of like best friends, he like will still like approach newcomers and kind of invite them into that. And I think that's really amazing. Um, I know that he has sponsees, and with like each sponsee that he gets, I feel like I see like this different growth in him. And it's really cool to see like the growth in his sponsees as well. Um, when it comes to fellowship, I feel like he introduces people in and will also hang out with them one on one, which I think is important. If we're all hanging out, or if I'm just hanging out with Stanley, like a meeting will be soon, and he's like, I gotta go to a meeting. And I feel like that's kind of a contagious thing. Like, if you're by yourself, you can be like, well, I kind of just want to like watch a show and I don't want to go to a meeting. But if another alcoholic talks about going to a meeting and then afterwards just continuing doing what you're doing, it's like, it's really nice to just like go with that person. Um, I feel like he's really in touch with his like spiritual side and his higher power, which has helped me. Um, I feel like a lot of times while I've been in AA and outside of AA, I've been like contemplating like, am I religious? Am I spiritual? And having someone that talks about that often like helps me get more comfortable with it. And um, along with that, and like any doubts that I have with like the program, like I feel like I can tend to nitpick things, and Stanley has a very like open mind where I see like after talking to him, I get the bigger picture of what it's about. Um, and I stop having those doubts, which is really nice. Um, I know that through his sobriety, he's gone through a lot of stuff, and I feel like he utilizes like the steps and fellowship, and then he has things outside of the program that help him grow through all of it too, which I think is really important. Um, yeah, that's what I got.
Thanks, Jules. Stanley Alcoholic. It's been a little bit since I've been to this meeting and spoke here. It's good to see everybody. It's always good to be in a room full of people like me, regardless of where we come from, different backgrounds. Yeah, I didn't really think about what I was gonna say today. I kind of just want to talk about what it was like, and then what happened, and then what it's like now. So I'll do that. So let me start from the beginning. My earliest memory is getting hit in the head with a broomstick from my little brother when I was like 3 or 4, I think. And I remember going to the hospital and bleeding a lot. And I remember it being like a dream. Um, so that's the beginning. Let me skip. So, okay. When I was young, I don't know. I thought though I didn't have any reference point for how people approach the world, let alone a fucking 4 or 5 year old. I don't remember when I gained consciousness. Must have been around 3 or by the time I got hit by that broomstick. But since I was young, I remember being scared. That was the most prominent feeling for me, was being scared. It wasn't like, obviously I was psyched on life like other little kids were, but the primary like thing with me was I felt like a little chihuahua a lot of the time, just like "Ugh," just like scared and anxious, and like wondering like what's gonna happen, like is something bad gonna happen, and that was like that's been from the very first time I can remember thinking or being alive. That was like the drone throughout my entire life. Um, and so going into school, I didn't know how to approach social situations. You know, people would come up to me and I would think, okay, are they gonna like, am I getting bullied right now, or am I are they trying to be friends with me? I didn't know. I was just suspicious, and I just felt like an alien. And for a while there, I thought everybody felt the same way I felt. I thought everybody felt, and maybe they do. I don't really know. I don't know how everybody else thinks, but other people, other kids, I should say, seem to have this way of connecting with one another and having fun and playing and opening up with one another. And I just couldn't do that. I felt more comfortable, well, not comfortable, but I was too scared to engage with that. And even though I wanted that, I wanted to engage in the camaraderie and, you know, forming these memories. I didn't. I would play by myself. I would stay home a lot and do a lot of these like I don't know. I don't know if anybody's born alcoholic. I don't really know that. I know for me, I felt like an alcoholic from like day one. I just didn't know it was, I didn't know there was a word for it. I didn't know I could frame it in this thing we call alcoholism. Um, and so as I got older, that feeling went away. Or no, it didn't go away. It stayed the same, but I found other people who were like me around middle school. People were kind of like outcasts and you know, they did a lot of drugs. And I didn't do any of that. I was fucking raw dogging it. I don't know. I didn't engage in like alcohol or drugs as a teenager because I was afraid of what would happen at home. Um but I remember gravitating toward like the crowd of people that were like outcasts and didn't necessarily fit the mold of what everybody else was doing. Um, but even then, I still felt alone. I didn't really feel like I was connecting. I still felt like like I felt different. Um, and that was kind of like my theme growing up was I was like I'm this different guy, you know, I'm unique, all these things, and then the delusion started, and I would find ways to escape. This is before I found drugs or alcohol, and I would spend a lot of time alone and a lot of time engaging in um, just things to like get out of where I was, whether it was like music or like computer programming or just this random stuff. I developed a lot of hobbies, and I would obsessively do these things and ignore. I wouldn't eat. I wouldn't see anybody. I would just do these things because looking back, I didn't want to be inside of Stanley. I didn't want to feel who I was. I didn't care to get to know who I was. I didn't care to connect to the outside world or to anybody else. I just wanted to be here. In my head is where I felt comfortable because that's where I'd been since I was a little kid. I'd been in my head, you know, rather than when I'm talking with somebody, I'm not talking with you. I'm thinking, how do I respond to seem like a human right now? Or like, you know, or how do I respond to make this person like me or think that I'm not a fucking weirdo? It's like that. I'm not really connecting with people. I'm not really connecting with you. Um, and uh, I guess I should back up a little bit. So I grew up with my mom for the first 12 years of my life didn't drink, use drugs or anything, at least to my knowledge. I don't know. My dad drank, but I didn't really know to what extent until, you know, I heard him throwing up across the hallway every night when I was like 8 or some shit like that. And even then, I just thought, wow, he's getting sick a lot, man. I hope he's okay. Um, and then like 8 or 9 years old, like I lived in the neighborhood I lived in is called low rent. Like we're in Browning and it's like the lowest fucking possible like it's the lowest rent you can get and it's fucking it's gross. There's like dead rats everywhere and they don't clean it. It's gross, dude. I don't want to live there again. But that's where I grew up and I remember being like, yeah, 8 or 9 or in those like those grade school years. And my first experience with seeing people fucked up was my parents would throw these parties, which I now not know now were parties. I just thought they were having. I was like, oh, adults have friends over at like 2 a.m. and they're all fucked up. That's what I thought was normal. You know what I mean? And they're playing music like really loud until like 3 a.m. And I remember like occasionally I'd walk out of my room and there'd be random people and I'd be like, whoa, this is weird. And my mom would quickly like, oh, let's get you back to bed. And that was a common occurrence. It wasn't weird. I didn't talk to my friends about it. I didn't see anything wrong with it. I was just this is what mom and dad do. Um and then there was a lot of, you know, it wasn't until later in life when I talked with other people finally, or connected with other people, that I realized it's not normal for your, not, well, normal, but it's not healthy, I should say, for your parents to be fighting every day, or for them to be bringing you into the fold and to use you as ammo against the other person, or to call your mom a whore or your dad a cunt or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not normal when you're like 6 or 7 for these things to be going on, but it was normal to me. Because I didn't have a barometer for how people lived, because I wasn't connecting to anybody. I wasn't allowed to see my extended family. My parents told me, your uncles are fucking crazy and your aunts are weird, and don't talk to them, and don't. I was taught from a young age from my dad, like, don't let people know your business, because they'll betray you and they'll stab you in the back, and you cannot trust anybody. Um, so that was what I was fed growing up. I was fed all these things. I was fed, you don't trust anybody, isolate. It's normal to have alcohol. It's normal to be fucked up. It's normal to fight in a relationship. These things are what it was ingrained in me, that this is what healthy or normal living is. This is the way it should be. Um, and so I graduated high school barely. They pushed me. I think I graduated with like a 2.1 or something like that, or like a 1.9. I shouldn't have graduated. I don't know. They were just trying to push everybody out as much as they could on the res. They're like, oh, look at how many people we have graduating. So everybody graduated, and I went right into community college, and still wasn't drinking at this time. Still I hadn't smoked a fucking cigarette, I don't think. Maybe I had. I didn't do anything because I was afraid of my dad. He'd ingrained in us, you're gonna end up like your uncles and your aunts, and because I'd drive around the streets, we'd pick up people who were homeless and smelled like wine and were dying, and those were all my aunts and my uncles, and those were all my cousins. We were related to all those people, and so from an early age I was like, oh shit, well, I don't want to do that. And I would judge them a lot. I'd be like, why can't they just not drink? Like, why can't they just like not use? Because I didn't know anything. And so finally, that, the fighting or whatever, like the way that my house operated, I had gained a little bit of experience in connecting with people. By the time I was like 2019, um, I'd gained a little bit of experience. I was finally able to leave my yard and engage with my friends. I was finally able to like do normal things that you do when you're like 12 or 13 or whatever. And so I was kind of doing some catch up. And and I'm and that's when it really started to hit me how dark my house was and how not safe I felt in there. But because before, I think I was just in this like, just the blinders on of like, okay, make sure she doesn't die, make sure he doesn't die, make sure they don't kill each other, also make sure I don't kill myself, like just complete survival mode. And then I remember having these panic attacks. They started to come, and I started to feel really irritated. And I remember feeling very discontent with where I was at. And I remember I couldn't sleep. And so I was restless, irritable, and discontent. And I didn't have any medicine for it. I didn't have a way to treat that. I'd had nobody was teaching, this young kid how to process any of this or anything like that. Um, and so finally my dad sat me down after they had like this big kind of like this big blow up, I look at it kind of like a relapse. Like I could go like a month. A month was really hard, but I could do it without drinking, you know? And like the first few days, I'd be like, "Look, I'm a new me. Like, look at this. I'm not, I'm finally turning it around." And I'd get like full of myself. I'd be like, dude, I can go like 2 days without drinking. Like, like what the fuck? This is like, I'm so strong. Yeah. And, but then a month, man, I'd be miserable, and it would be like there'd be so much pressure built up in my soul, and this cap was ready to explode. And that's what it was like growing up for me. There was that pattern in my household of like, we could go like a day or two, a week, 2 weeks, and then you'd finally start breathing and feel good, and then the cap would blow. Um, and so I think we had like there was a peace. There was a peace in the house for like a month or two or something like that. And the jitters and my body started to feel everything. Um, and then the cat blew. And then my dad sat me down. He was like, they call me Gus. I don't know where they got that nickname from, but he said, Gus, you got to get out of here, man. and you got to take Bruce with you, my younger brother, because we were both living there. Um, and I was like, what the fuck do you mean? Like, I don't know what that means. What do you mean get out of here? Like, I don't know how to fucking live, dude. Like, I don't know what that means. And then I talked with my younger brother and I was like, actually, we got to get out of here. Like, this isn't a good, yeah, we got to get out of here, dude. And so we moved to Missoula, and that was my first time as an adult. I grew up in, like, this area up until like the age of 8 or something like that. But this is my first time engaging with the real world, because living on the res, you're it's kind of this bubble of ideas, and people, everybody looks the same and everybody thinks the same and everybody drinks the same. So you don't, there's no there's just no outside opinion, really. And so I enrolled at the UM, and me and my younger brother got a house, and I was ready to start anew. And I was like, I'm gonna recreate myself and be an entirely new person. I'm gonna be confident. All these things that I was, I'm gonna be confident. I'm gonna have a lot of friends. I'm gonna like be able to sing. I didn't know how to sing, but I was like, I'm gonna sing. I'm gonna do all these things, and I had these grand aspirations for what my life was gonna be. And I remember going into my first class and seeing people who weren't native, and it wasn't a shock to me. Like, I grew up when I was a young kid. I grew up around non-natives predominantly. But when these people spoke, they were so fucking smart, man. It was wild. Like, they were so intelligent, and they felt so connected to the moment and passionate about what they were saying. And I just felt, and in that moment, I'd already felt like an outsider, but I felt like, whoa, I am definitely not like anybody else. And so the uniqueness was more ingrained in me. I was like, I'm unique. I am this, like, I don't know what I'm just different. And so I changed the environment, but it didn't change who I was. And I don't know if I was disappointed. I just kind of went back to what I was doing in Browning. I didn't leave my room. I didn't leave my house. I didn't talk about what, I didn't even know what I was feeling. I didn't know anything. It was just still in that fucking survival mode, man, of like, play video games, play your guitar, engage in everything that's up here and not out here, because out here is unsafe. Um, and I did that for a few years, and I went on like my first date, and all these things happened, and obviously those didn't go well. Like, I didn't, nothing bad happened. I just felt not normal, and I didn't know how to navigate anything. And I'd finally, let's see, when I was like 20, I can't remember, like early 20s, I started losing a lot of weight randomly. I remember I was like 220 pounds, and within a month I was 180 pounds. And I remember being really depressed, and a lot of suicidal thoughts started coming into my brain. And this is summer. And usually in the summer, even then, I would at least try to walk outside, do these things that I thought would help me. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't leave my couch. It was like June or July. And I was peeing a lot. And then my mouth was really dry. And I was like, damn, I saw the weight going down. I was like, I need to eat more sugar. I need to eat more carbs, and I need to bulk up. And then one day I was like, I'm gonna go to the hospital. And the doctor came in, and he had this needle, and he had like these vials, and I was like, what is that? And he's like, it's insulin for your diabetes. And I'm like, what the fuck? I freaked out, dude, because this guy essentially told me, like, you're dying. I didn't know what diabetes was. I didn't know what type 1 diabetes was. I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna die. And and so that was like the first major shakeup in my adulthood, or I'd say in my life, that kind of jolted me to change. And there's been moments like that throughout my life, and I'll get to one of them that eventually led to me getting here. But there's been these little shakeups that happen. And that was one of them. And I, after that, after the shock of being diagnosed and everything, and all that, I remember a semester in school was going to start, and I'd had another one of those grand, realizations. I was like, I'm going to change myself. I'm going to do this again. I'm going to learn how to connect with people. I'm going to start a band. I'm going to do all these things that I've wanted to do in my life, and I'm going to learn how to be a fucking human. I'm going to do it. And and I did it. you know, and in whatever small scale, I finally started talking to people because at that point it was like the doctor told me like, yeah, if you would have came a little later, like you probably could have died. You know, my blood sugar was at like a 700 and normal functioning is like 80. And and so I came close to dying, and through that, it was like I look at like the universe like finally gave me some air, and it's like a balloon that has like a, you know, that's not tight at the end. Like I got some air, but it was slowly going down. But I was gonna ride this breath of air that I'd gotten, and I did. And you know, I went to school, got good grades. I found some friends. I'd formed a little band, and I met a girl. Um, for the first time in my life, I started connecting with somebody in a way that, you know, didn't feel like I was hiding myself, at least at the beginning. And this was around COVID, and I do not know how to function in relationships. I just don't, you know what I mean? And at that point, that was my first like real relationship. I was going in blind, and I was carrying 23 years of what my parents had taught me into it, and 23 years of not knowing how to connect with other people or show or convey how I was feeling in a healthy way. And so this girl felt all of it. Um, you know, like the classic thing, like the first month or two, I was Stanley, you know, like all whatever it is, you know, that attracts somebody to somebody like me. And and then the insecurity came out, and then the paranoia started coming up, and then it everything, all the negative feelings about myself started to manifest, and I couldn't hold them in any longer, and I couldn't numb them out, and they had to come out, and they came out toward this person. Not initially. I remember being in this, and I remember just being fucking bothered by things and by myself, and I felt like a loser, even though I felt really lucky to be with this person. And as an alcoholic, I put everything into this person. I was like, this is my life now. 2 months in, you are like, you are mine. It's that possessiveness. It's just that to the fucking extreme, dude. And we moved in like 3 months into this thing because, you know, COVID or whatever. And I was just like, yes, like, okay, this is all great. This is all great. Just full on like no, no stability in how I was thinking or how I was approaching anything. It was just full fucking blast. Let's do this thing. Um, and and I remember reaching a point in that relationship to where nothing was going on. Things were okay, but inside I felt like complete dirt. I felt bad. I felt jealous. I felt angry. I felt like a loser, and I felt gross and all these things. And I didn't know what to do. And I didn't want to treat her bad. And and then one day she suggested we you know, there's nothing going on. This was like the fucking pandemic. And we were sitting around. She's like, "Do you want to get some wine?" And I was like, and then I drank occasionally up until this point. You know, I mean, I gotten drunk like one or two times, and I drank like a gentleman up to this point. I could do it. I could go to whatever, any kind of gathering, have a few beers, and be okay. Um, but I remember her mentioning that, and I remember all the memories that my dad had taught me, or all the things that that had been told me growing up. And I just remember getting angry. It's like, no, I don't want wine, dude. It just felt, it was like this, like, it felt like it felt like I just felt danger. You know what I mean? I felt scared. Um, and then finally we talked about more, and I was like, let's do it, dude. Let's get some wine. You know, let's do it. You know, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. You know, whatever this is just bullshit that doesn't need to affect us, man. Like this is nothing. And so that first night we got a bottle of wine, and she had a glass, and then I had the rest of it. Because I remember after that first glass, I didn't I stopped that feeling. My sponsor has talked about it, and I equate it to like after the first one and a half to two glasses of wine, we were sitting on the couch, and she was over there, and for the first time in like a few months, I felt like I could be open. And I felt like I could finally like, oh shit, I took an actual full breath of air, and I'm finally sitting down, and I'm finally looking at you, and I'm finally connecting with you. I'm finally connecting with how I'm feeling. And it was just that daze and that I don't give a fuck what's going on right now. I don't care how I'm feeling. I'm okay in this moment. I never felt that in my entire life before. And we finished that we finished that glass of wine and we went to bed and the next day things were normal. Um, but I remembered how I felt and I was like, dude, alcohol's fucking rad. That's the best thing in the world. I remember thinking that, man. 'Cause I wasn't in the band. It was just me and her and my brother and family friends or whatever. Like my world was so small. And so nothing was going on. And then that became our routine. Every weekend, we'd get like one or two glasses of wine. She would have one, maybe two, and I would finish the rest of it. And I'd be up until like 3 or 4 a.m. just nursing this fucking wine and sitting. And then at that point, I remember that started crying for the first time in a few years with the alcohol. And I was like, oh my God. And I just felt everything. Like all these feelings were coming up and all the self-pity and all the feeling of my past and everything that I was repressing was coming up. And I felt like a human. I was like, this is what humans feel like. They feel their emotions and they connect with somebody and they talk about shit. And I was like, oh my God, I feel like a human. Wow. And I chased that and that became what I wanted. I wanted to feel like that all the time. And it must have been like, I don't know. It wasn't long before, she approached me, was like, "Hey, you might have a problem." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "Well, I last night I was sleeping. I went to bed at 1 and you were up until 5 still drinking by yourself." And and I didn't, again, I had no reference for how people drank or anything like that. And I was like, no, I don't think that's the problem. I went to work the next day. Um, you know, and and things were fine. And and I remember something that happened when I would drink was I would feel everything, but also I couldn't, there was no restraint of tongue when I drank. And every insecurity I felt, I would project it on whoever I was with, and it was with this woman at this point. So every insecurity I felt and everything I felt, everything I felt came out of me because I couldn't hold it in. And she got all of that. And it got really, really dark and really, really abusive, really, really quick. And I remember growing up seeing the way my dad treated my mom. And I remember hating him and being like, I'm not going to treat my wife like that or my girlfriend. I'm not going to do that. I'm not my dad. And like that, I became what essentially what I said I wouldn't become. And I couldn't stop. And that pattern of abuse, drinking, whatever. And then I'd get these moments of clarity and be like, oh my God, I love you. I got to stop. Like, I can do this. Let's do this. I'm going to stop for you. It was this cycle. And the classic starting to hide alcohol in the house, lying about how much I drank, trying to seem sober when I was actually drunk, blacking out and ending up in my bed, um, and just engaging in all these dark things started to happen. And I think we were a year in, and we'd had a big fight. And up until this point, I still had not conceded that I want alcohol. I was like, I am just a traumatized person, and I'm in therapy and I'm working on it, and I can have a drink occasionally. That was my mindset. Um, and I was still trying to find that feeling of like finally breathing. I was still chasing that shit. Um, because I was still getting it. A year into heavy drinking, I was still getting that. Alcohol was still working for what I needed it to do. It still allowed me to feel my feelings and be who I was and feel kind of free and connect to something. Um, and and yeah, and things got really dark and she had to move out for a little bit. And I remember that was the first time that I had tried to kill myself in adulthood. And I didn't succeed. There's like a whole story behind that, but like my brother came in and it was all this shit. And when he found me, he was like, okay, obviously there was shock, but he was like, you're coming home with me, dude. Like you're coming home with me. And I was like, but she's not here and whatever. All this, it was just chaos. It was absolute insanity. Did not know how to like problem solve or manage my own emotions or talk to anybody. I was like a little baby, genuinely. That's who I was. I just was a fucking mess. And my brother, big brother moved me into his house, and she finally came back because I talked to her and I told her how much I loved her. And that alcoholic kind of like, whatever the fuck you call it, the alcoholic pull, I think it is like, you know, when, I don't know, this is the whole thing, but like, if I connect with somebody who has trauma in the past, generally there's like that pull, that magnetic pull that happens because they see me as an alcoholic and all my shit is familiar to them, and so they're more tied to me and they're more pulled toward me, and that's what was happening in this. And she came back. She moved in with me and my brother, and my brother was like, okay, this is gnarly. I seen him. In retrospect, I saw him trying to approach this in a way that could help because he wanted to help, and he was like, "Okay, let's try some controlled drinking," and that didn't work, and nothing worked, and eventually he had to kick me out, and we had gotten our own place, and I was like, "I'm gonna stop," and I remember this memory of her and I in the garden, and I'd gone 2 months without drinking. I'd made it 60 days. And we were gardening, and I was fucking just, like, fuck, bro. Like, just like, I can't, there's no words for it, but just like, and, we were planning some shit, and she looked up and she's like, this is the happiest I've been in a long time because I was sober finally, and I was gardening with her. I remember looking at her and being like, I love you. And I had 3 bottles of wine hidden in our basement, and those had been there for a few weeks. And I had this, and when I bought them, I was like, okay, if shit gets too gnarly, I'm gonna drink these guys. And I drank those guys, and that was April 17th of 2021. No, April 16th of 2021. And that was my last drink, those 3 bottles of wine. The next morning, I woke up in St. Pat's, and she was gone, and my house was empty, and my younger brother was there, and he had moved in, and that's when the next jolt in my life happened, the next change up, and that was April 16th was when I stopped drinking. April 17th or 18th is when I'd met a dude across the zoo group, who this goofy looking guy was standing, out a market on front, and I waddled over him crying, and I was like, "Are you Michael?" And he was like, "Yeah, yeah, nice to meet you." He was just cheery as fuck, and he's like, "Come on, let's go down, man." And then he walked me down to the zoo group, and and I sat there and I couldn't look up, and I was crying. I mean, I was like looking through like my hair, and I saw Frank and I saw Darren and all these other old timers, and some of them are gone now. And I saw Danny, and I saw people in the zoo group, and they were all looking at me or talking to me. And that was the first time in my life that I felt comfort from somebody looking at me and talking to me that I didn't know well. That was the very first time I remember feeling connected to somebody talking to me that I didn't know. That wasn't my brother or somebody I was dating. And Frank asked me, he was like, you ever done hose drinking? And I laughed because I didn't know what that meant. And he told the group, and he told me, he's like, he owned this house with his wife, and he had a garden hose, and he owned the house. He fucking owned the hose. He owned it. And he remembered he would put tequila in his garden hose. He planted in there, and he'd tell his wife he was mowing the lawn, and he'd go around the corner and he'd start drinking tequila out of the hose. And I wasn't like, you're crazy. I was like, that's a great idea, dude. That sounds like great. Like, I should have done that. I could have hidden it better. And I'd laughed for the first time in that moment of like fucking like darkness and like self-pity and all that shit. I was laughing with him. And that's what I found the very first meeting I had. I felt connection, and I didn't feel as alone, and I didn't feel I didn't feel like as big of a piece of shit, even though I'd done things that a piece of shit would do. I didn't feel like that. And these people talked to me, and they told me, yeah, I'm a piece of shit. I've done the things that you've done, and I don't drink today. And that didn't make sense to me. Um, that didn't make sense to me. How do you live without alcohol? How do you do that? How do you go to a social event? How do you talk with people? How do you connect to yourself without being fucked up? That made no sense to me at all. Um, and my sponsor told me, you're not going to figure this out. It's not going to make sense to you, but I suggest you do this. and he started giving me suggestions, and other people, I would listen to other people to be like, hey, maybe go to this conference, maybe go to this camp out, maybe don't call her, maybe don't call into work right now, maybe don't say what you actually are feeling in this moment, and maybe let it sit and call somebody else, call another alcoholic, maybe don't drink over this, maybe don't go to the liquor store. And people were telling me these things, they weren't telling me what to do, they were giving me suggestions, um and it started to work going into this program. And I finally learned what I don't know, are the steps in here? Oh yeah, started I looked at these, and I remember the first thing I saw number 9. No, in a month. Like, I'm gonna make amends if we're gonna get back. And yeah, and then my sponsor was like, let's not do that. Let's start with 1, and then we'll get there when we get there. And that's what he told me. He never told me no. He's like, we'll get there when we get there. And so we did it, and it was a lot of breadcrumbing. It was like, oh, these promises are coming. Whoa, okay. I'll keep doing this. I want to feel better. It was like, I felt like the program was breadcrumbing into eventually not drinking and living a life to where I didn't feel like a piece of shit every day. And so yeah, I got in here, yeah, April 17th, 18th, whatever, around that time. And I haven't had alcohol since. Um, I've done other things, but not alcohol. Um, and I don't think that's not from within, because from within, I don't know how to treat people. I don't know how to live with another person. I don't know how to make friends. I don't know how to trust people. I to manage my own feelings, or at least feel my feelings. I don't know how to do that of myself. Like, there's a whole world behind me that propelled me into who I am now, and that person does not know how to function in reality. He's better up here. He feels better. He feels more comfortable up here. And through this program, I'm able to get out of here and be here. I'm able to talk with people, and I'm able to connect, and I'm able to live without drinking or without the need of a substance. And I'm able to just be a human. But that didn't come quick, and it didn't come cleanly, and it didn't come easily, and all these things. And I think the thing that kept me safe, not safe, but the thing that kept me kind of going forward and all that stuff was going to meetings, um, talking with my sponsor every day, and having a service position. For the first year and a half, I had a service position. And I was at the zoo group at this time every day, or every week. I was at the zoo group at this specific time, and I was talking with people. And yeah, and I got the rub, and from these old timers, other people that had gone a few years without drinking and had successful relationships and had successful careers. I don't know how to do any of that. I don't know, but I do know, if I follow these steps, and if I use these steps to tackle every problem and feeling I have, then people around me are generally safe, and I'm generally safe. Um, and I guess one of the big things that now, now, like Bill said, I sponsor people now because that's what you do. The 12 step, like, that's, I what is it's like, in order to keep, you have to give it away. And I think at my point in my recovery, where I'm at, is Stanley's starting to go away a little bit. Like, I've done things that I wanted to do, and engage in, I have a life that I couldn't imagine 3 years ago. I remember Frank coming up to me after a meeting, and I was 3 months in, and I was still slouched over, still like crying occasionally, and I couldn't look people in the eye. And I remember just like waddling out of the zoo group and walking upstairs, and Frank was behind me. He was like, Stanley, how's it going? And I was like, good, man. And and I was still missing her. I was still missing the life that I had. I still was missing the comfort of, like, equated to, like, when you piss yourself, you're warm, and so I still miss pissing myself and feeling that warmth. And and Frank was like, he was like, all right, he's like, he looked at me, he's like, I want you to imagine where your life is going to be in a year if you keep doing this. And it was some motivational shit, dude. It was fucking a movie moment, dude. It was wild. And I looked at him and I was like, yeah, man. Like, and I was like, I thought like, yeah, I want to hold down a job. I want her back, obviously, and all these things. And, and I thought what I thought I wanted at that point. I was like a few months into recovery or whatever. And he's like, you're gonna so far undershoot where you're actually gonna be that you're gonna need sunglasses. And I thought that was so fucking corny, but it was great, dude. It was great. And I was like, wow. And I believed him, dude. That was the first time I'd believed when somebody said something motivational to me in my life. I believed him because I'd heard his story and I knew where he came from. And I was like, wow, dude, okay, I'm gonna keep doing this. Let's see where this goes. And I kept doing it and I didn't drink and I stayed in the steps and I kept in contact with my sponsor. And if you told me 3 years ago I'd be where I'm at today, I'd be like, that's a sick dream, like that's cool. That's awesome. I don't think people can do that. Um, but I'm here. And here's the funny thing though, is I'm still discontent. I still get irritable and I still get restless and I still think I need to change something, even though I've overshot where thought I would need to be at. It's still not enough for me. And the only time it is enough, and the only time that I feel like I'm sat down and I'm in that moment where I can breathe and I can settle in and I can look at you is when I'm in these steps and when I'm talking to God, or I call it God, higher power, whatever you call it. That is when I truly feel connected to the life I have now and to everybody around me. Um, and that just shows that I don't have this figured out. I'm not an alcoholic that has recovered. I'm an alcoholic. Um, and I remember that every day. Because I don't have the cure and I don't have this life. I just have a reprieve from my alcoholism. And through that, I'm able to find some cool shit, do some cool things. But yeah, if you're new, keep coming back. It gets better. Follow the breadcrumbs. That's all I got.